Have you ever noticed that sometimes when you go outside into nature, you get this kind of relaxed feeling, this in nature kind of feeling? Well, I have my own personal opinion about where that comes from, and I don't think that it's just any random chance that it happens. Years ago, I moved to this little tiny town in Kansas by the name of Ogden, and this town was basically the closest thing to a real-life horror movie set that I've ever experienced. I remember whenever I was driving into the town to move there, but it was just a little tiny town surrounded by what seemed like endless woods from where I was, kind of like what you see behind me. And as I was coming in on the freeway, I got this aura, this feeling coming from the trees that I could see. Look up Edvard Munch's The Scream if you're not familiar with it. It's one of the most famous paintings in the world. Real abstract painting of a guy going on a bridge, right? That was the emotional content that was coming to me from the trees, and I was like, oh my God, what is wrong with these trees, right? So, and it went downhill from there. I lived there for almost 2 years. But the first definite experience that I had that was unique was I was sitting in my apartment. I was living with my sister and her fiance at the time. I had fallen on hard times and needed to start my life over fresh. And they had a couple of friends, that married couple that were in the Army, that were out of town for a month for training, and we were looking after their home while they were gone. So the fiance is talking with me. He's like, oh, I forgot to, I think I washed some dishes that he had been eating while he was over there, right? So he handed me the key, said, can you head over there, wash the dishes, make sure everything's put away for the evening. So I'm walking down the street, heading to their trailer home. We lived in an apartment complex. I'm going down the main road, and you know, our place is here, and then there's yard, road, their place. And in the middle is a big park, and I used to exercise out there every day. And as I'm walking up the road, heading to the park, I feel way out ahead of me, 150, 200 feet away, this concept of some entity going, oh, there he is. And then I felt something rushing to me, and all of a sudden I felt fear of the dark. Like there was this threatening presence all around me. You know, you look in the shadows and you think you see things, right? Like when you're a little kid and you always, you know, oh, there's nothing there. It's just a feeling, it's in your mind, imaginary, right? So I get to this place and I unlock the door and I open it, and all of a sudden I get this intense sensation that there's a woman in front of me. There's nobody there, but I get the intense sensation that there's a woman there, and she's glaring at me, and no spoken words. I didn't hear it with my ears, but I heard her saying, like, where have you been? And I could tell that she thought I was her husband coming home late from having been drunk, and it was some exact moment in time frozen in place, going in little circles. And I was like, so there was such an intense hostility being beamed directly into me that my body started shaking, and I was like, oh my God, like I had to call my dad on the phone and talk with him on speakerphone just to keep my attention on something else, right? And it followed me back to the apartment, and that's a whole different story for a later time. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe I'm imagining it, and so then I am walking to work the next morning because it wasn't that far away, so why not walk? And the whole way there, I'm getting this like intense feeling of the dark kind of sensation, which I'd never had before. And I got to work, and I still had that feeling even when I was there. And I finally asked a coworker, I said, do you feel something coming from that corner of the room? And the coworker says, oh my God, I'm glad you said something. I thought that was just me, right? So there was clearly something happening, right? And I had a whole bunch of other experiences in that town with ghosts, right? Which the sensation is very easy to describe, right? It feels like, you know, when you go walking through the mall and you pass by a storefront and you can feel the change in air pressure in your eardrums. You can tell when there's an open doorway or when you're next to a wall or a column or something like that. So it's that kind of sensation, except against a whole surface of your body, and it contains some emotional content. So like angry, sad, afraid, startled, you know, and if you turn or if it moves, you can feel it move, right? So anyway, fast forward a little bit. I'm working at this Kung Fu school that I'm extremely passionate about, and you will hear more about in the future. I haven't been there in a long time. and that's a different story entirely. And I'm the groundskeeper. I teach Kung Fu in the evenings, but I'm the groundskeeper during the day, which includes taking care of the houseplants. And just to give you a concept of how many houseplants we had, how many potted plants indoors and outside and everything, regularly we would have people come in and ask us, oh, how much for the plants? Like, oh, we're a Kung Fu school. Like, oh, I thought this was a nursery. Like, lots of potted plants, right? The whole goal was to make indoor like the outdoor natural world. We wanted to practice in nature, even though we had AC running and stuff like that, right? It was actually, you know, when you went through the front door, you get that feeling of like, wow, here I am, right? So the guy who was the original groundskeeper had broken his shoulder, so he had somebody replacing him, and the guy replacing him was he's a very friendly guy, he's a very well-meaning guy, but got a lot going mentally all the time, you know. Who doesn't at different points in their life, right? And so he would be in this very hectic rush trying to get everything done, and as a result, every single plant in the building, every one of them without exception, was either dying because it was underwatered or dying because it was overwatered. And he was trying to teach me, and I'm being all hectic trying to keep up with him, right? And second day or third day, I get there before him, so I figure might as well get started even though I'm in training. So I go to the first plant and I fill up my water bucket and I'm pouring the water, and all of a sudden I feel the plant go and I go, well, that was weird. So I go to the second plant and I begin to water it, and it cringes, and I get curious and I look and I see that there's a plastic pot that it's actually potted in inside a larger ceramic pot, right? The plastic pot is just sitting in the ceramic pot. So I pick it up and I look inside, and there's all this water down in the bottom of the ceramic pot. So I throw that out and I put the plastic pot back inside the ceramic pot, and the plant, again, second plant goes, and I go, oh my God, I can talk to plants, right? I can like experience their emotional state. So I just went around the building just watering or dumping out water until all the plants, you know, basically said yay, right? And the funny thing is, they don't necessarily think in concepts. They don't say, give me a cheeseburger, or what are your thoughts on the Constitution? They just say, this is good, this is bad, or, you know, some emotional state, right? And so anyway, and I'm going around watering all these plants, and I get right down to the very end of the day, there's this hydrangea outside, and it's like dead. I mean, it's like, there must have been 2 cells left alive in the whole thing, right? And I took the garden hose and I set it down, because it was actually planted in the soil outside, and I turned the water on, and it's just gushing water. I mean, it's like the water's like piling up, and the hydrangea's not saying anything, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, I've been hallucinating, I'm a crazy person, right? And like the water's piling up higher and higher, and the hydrangea's still not saying anything, right? And I'm taking care of other plants, and I come back and the hydrangea still hasn't said anything yet. I'm like, oh, what am I doing? I'm a weirdo. And then finally, after like 6 minutes of just gushing garden hose water's this, I'm exaggerating, of course. But anyway, finally hydrangea was like, yep. So I go and I turn the water off. And as I walk back around the building, seeing what's going on, every single plant in that building was standing up straighter and was greener, including, when I got back around to it, the hydrangea, which was on death's door. And so I was like, okay, I know what's going on. Now, the interesting thing is, in addition to that, I have 3 things that I observed in my life that prove to me, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that plants are aware of what's going on around them, in addition to yay, boo, whatever emotional condition they have, right? So the first one was, at my house, we had this, it looked like bamboo, but it wasn't. It goes by some other name that I can never remember, so I call it shambu, because it's not really bamboo, but it looks like it. And there's this really invasive vine that started growing amongst it that's like impossible to get rid of unless you dig up every last microscope of root. It will come back. It's unkillable. It's the Terminator of vines, right? So anyway, and not only is that, it's very like aggressive. It'll tightly grow around and try to, you know, kill whatever it's growing on. So we'd rip it out and it'd grow back, and then we'd rip it out and it'd grow back, and it'd find like harder places way down in there, and you can't reach to get it, you know. And so one day, you know, we gave up. Fine, you get the shambu, we don't care. One day I looked up in the sky and I saw that, you know, we have a big old oak tree beside the house that had grown so tall that it was growing over the side of the house into the front yard. And this shambu was growing 12 feet up in the air. It had several strands that were all coiled around one another, and they were reaching out, and they had a little hook on the end. And here's this oak tree, and it would just every once in a while kind of like catch the very edge of that oak tree. And I'm like, oh my God, this evil vine knows that the oak tree is over there, and it's trying to grow its way over to it so it can grab it and kill it. It was incredible, right? So the second thing I observed was we had a pitcher plant, again, at the school, that was sitting in a hanging pot. Now, maybe you don't know what a pitcher plant is. They grow in the swamp, and it's a carnivorous plant, which means it eats bugs and other matter that it can absorb, right? Swamps have a lot of water in the soil, so it's very diluted, and you can't get minerals from it, so you can't grow, you know, shrubs and stuff like that, so it has to eat things in the air, right? That's where you get your Venus flytrap. The fly lands it, and then it eats the bug, and then that's how it gets its nutrients, right? Well, what a pitcher plant does is it's got a cup that hangs down, and it smells like rotting meat, and the bug falls in, and then he can't get back out, and then he just gets digested, kind of like the Sarlacc pit in Star Wars, except not as big and not as scary. So it's got these long leaves that are real wide with a thick stem growing down the middle that grows out past the edge of the leaf, and then it loops around, and then you've got the cup, right? And it has to have a lot of moisture in the air for the cup to grow, except we didn't have a lot of moisture in the school, and so the cups kind of shriveled down to just a dot. It just was continuing to grow because that's what it did, but it was no longer using its cups, right? And this thing grew so tall that it started to fall over sideways with its own weight. So what we did was we got on a ladder up there, and we took a steel wire and wrapped it around the body of the plant and stood it up straight, and then took the other end of the wire around the chain, and then that held it up, right? Well, again, it grew a little taller, and then the top half started to fall over, and I went up there with the ladder to do the same thing again, but it had beat me to the punch. It took its leaf and grew it toward the chain, and it had that little stem grow out past, and it wrapped its own little stem thingy around the chain twice, like a little plant fist. And all the other leaves had these little curlicue wraps on the end. It had evolved in a single lifetime to copy what we had done with this steel wire to keep itself from falling over, right? So that was the second thing I saw, and I was like, oh my God, because nobody did it. The plant did it itself, right? So the third thing, again at the school, we had a little island, you know, it's like round here and then two, so it's not quite a triangle, right? And we cleared out all the grass. We wanted to make it like a little desert kind of thing with a few flowers here and there and like a big bush kind of tree. Well, there was a little tuft of Johnson's grass. So there's a flower here and there's a tuft of Johnson's grass way over here, long way away, 20 feet away, right? And Johnson's grass, if you're not familiar with it, it has like a big hub, and then it grows out with little sub-node, little root, right, subroot thingies, and that's how it spreads into a yard, and you can like pull up like, you know, big old strings of grass. That's Johnson's grass, if you've ever seen that, right? So I didn't dig up the hub because, I don't know, I was lazy, didn't think it was important. I was going to get around to it eventually, and I watered that whole section and put down fertilizer. So this flower's way over here, and then Johnson's grass is way over here, and it grows in a straight line from the hub directly over to this flower that's 20 feet away and starts wrapping itself around and trying to smother it, at which point I'm like, you, sir, will die. And I dug it up and threw it in the dumpster, right? But I was like, how can this Johnson's grass know that this flower is all the way over here, make the decision to grow over there, and then try to smother it and kill it when it's the only thing growing near it, unless it knew what was going on and it made a conscious decision to do it, right? So when you go out into nature and you feel the of being around trees, it's not your imagination. There is something that is actually happening that you are perceiving, and I don't think you should discount your perceptions, because there's probably a lot more going on in the world right now that you can see or hear or feel, or some other perception that doesn't even have a word that you are aware of, but discounting because you think it's just your imagination, or it's not real, or it's just you, or something like that. And I think you would do well to maybe be more mindful of it, and possibly even see how much more can you perceive. Take care.